Okay, so this is the Algebra 1 lesson on 3.3, and today we're going to look at solving inequalities through multiplication and division. So let's do our warm-up first, and again, if you have not done the warm-up, go ahead and do that. Pause the video and then check if you got the right answer. So for number 1, we're going to divide both sides by -5, and then we're going to get a is equal to -6. Okay. For number 2, in order to get rid of a fraction, remember we have to multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to do that to both sides, multiply by -5 over 2 in order to get rid of it. So that will go away. And then this 2 can cancel with this 4 if you want to think of this as 4 over 1. I'll go into it 2 times. So then we're going to get 2 times 5, -5, which is 10. So x will equal -10. Okay? On number 3, to get rid of this -5, it's in the denominator, so it's y divided by it. So the inverse operation is to multiply by a -5. So we're going to do that to both sides so that it cancels. And then y will equal -3 times -5 is +15 over 8. Okay, again, we've got a fraction. So to get rid of it, we've got to multiply by the reciprocal. And I'm just going to write over this 4, so ignore that. So -4 over 3, because that will cancel. -4 over 3. And I'm going to cancel this 3 with this 6 right away. 3 goes into that 2 times. So I'm going to get x equals 2 times 4 is 8. I've got a negative sign over 11. So x equals -8 over 11. Okay, for graphing the inequalities. So we need to draw a number line. I'm going to pick -10 somewhere in the middle. I'm going to go above it, which remember negative numbers are bigger the smaller they are. So -9, -8. I'm going to put -11 and -12 over here. And then if you notice, we're going to need a closed circle because it's a greater than or equal than sign. So a closed circle at 10, -10, and then x is greater than. So x is going to be all the numbers to the right. Okay, our last warm up. If I have -3, -2, -1, -4, -5, I need an open circle because it's just a less than sign. So I'm going to put an open circle at 3, and it says x is everything less than -3. So that means it's going to the left. So make sure you guys get that concept. Okay, so today we're going to look at solving one-step inequalities with multiplication and division. Just remember that inequalities are very similar to equations. To solve an inequality that has multiplication or division, you need to undo the operation by dividing or multiplying both sides. Make sure you do it to both sides of the inequality by the same positive number. When we divide or multiply by a negative number, there's going to be different rules, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So all I want you to do to solve this inequality is to treat it like an equation. So if you notice, the x is being multiplied by 7. So in order to get rid of the 7, we need to divide both sides by 7. 7 goes away. And x is greater than -6. So to graph it at -6, we're going to do an open circle because it's just a greater than sign. And then it says x is everything greater. So it's everything to the right. All right, on this next example, I've got m divided by 3. Now, if I have the variable divided by a number, to get rid of it, I need to multiply by that number. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3, and 3 times 2.4 is 7.2, which is less than or equal to m. So at 7.2, which you kind of can estimate down here, I'm going to draw a closed circle. So it's probably somewhere in there. That's close enough. And it says if you read it, I always like to read it by reading the variable first. So I'm going to read it as m is greater than my 7.2, everything greater than or equal to 7.2. So it's everything over here to the right. And you can do that. You can, if that helps you to figure it out, you can read it in that way. Okay, so again, if I have a fraction multiplied by a variable, the way I get rid of a fraction, it's a little hard to divide by the fraction, so we multiply by the reciprocal. So that cancels this. Then I'm left with r is less than. I'm going to cancel this 3 with this 12. 4 times 4 is 16. R is less than 16. So open circle at 16. And R is less than. So it's everything to the left. Okay? All right. If you multiply or divide both sides of an inequality by a negative number, the inequality is not true. So in order to make it true, we have to reverse the inequality sign. Okay? So that means we're going to look at another set of properties when we're dealing with multiplying or dividing by a negative number. So if you multiply both sides, okay, by a negative number, you need to flip the original sign so that it's facing the other way. So in the end, it'll be facing the opposite way. If you divide both sides by a negative number, so we're dividing by -4, you also need to flip the sign the other way, okay? So again, if we're dividing or multiplying by a negative number, we're going to flip the signs. However, please be cautious. Don't change the direction of the inequality just because you see a negative sign. So for example, don't change the symbol if you're solving 4x is less than -24, because technically you would just be dividing by 4 in this to solve it, and you're not dividing by a negative number. Even though there's a negative number in the problem, you're not actually dividing by a negative number. So don't flip the sign for those types of problems. In other words, basically, if I'm multiplying or dividing by positive numbers, I don't change anything. And that's what we did earlier in the lesson. Okay, so let's do some examples with our negatives. All right, I have -12x is greater than 84. Now, if x is being multiplied by -12, to get rid of it, I'm going to divide by -12. Okay, x. Now, I just divided by a negative number, so I need to change the sign the opposite direction. And 84 divided by -12 is -7. So x is less than -7. So we're going to do open circle at -7, and x is less than -7. Okay? All right, for this one, we've got -2/5 times x is greater than 6, or you can read it as 2x over -5 is greater than 6. All right, I'm looking at this as a -2/5 fraction, so I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, so -5 over 2, in order to get rid of it. So that will cancel and that will cancel. Now I've got x left over. And since I am multiplying by a negative number, I need to flip the sign. And 2 goes into 6 3 times. So I'm left with 3 times -5, which is -15. And then to graph this, we can just put some numbers down here. You don't have to put a ton. So at -15, it's going to be an open circle, and then it says that x is less than, so it's everything to the left. Okay, let's do one last example. I've got -8 is less than or equal to x divided by -3. Well, if I have the variable divided by a number, in order to get rid of it, I need to multiply by that number. That's the inverse operation. So I'm going to multiply both sides by -3. This -3 and this -3 will cancel. I've got -3 times -24, or -8. Remember, negative times negatives make a positive, and then 3 times 8 is 24. And I multiplied by a negative number, so I need to flip the sign this direction and then put an x in. So I can read this in two ways. I can read it as 24 is greater than or equal to x, or I can read it as x is less than or equal to 24. So at 24, it's going to be a closed circle because I'm including 24. And then again, I like to read it with the variable first and say x is less than 24, less than or equal. So I know that everything goes to the left. Okay. One last example, and it is a word problem. So we've got another gift card. This time it's Jill. Jill has a $20 gift card to an art supply store. where 4-ounce tubes of paint are $4.30 after tax. What are the possible numbers of tubes that she can buy? So she's got a $20 gift card. She wants to buy these tubes of paint, and each one costs $4.30. And we want to know what's the most amount of tubes she can buy. All right, and they tell us to let P represent the number of tubes of paint that she can buy. On your homework, I actually wrote, or your notes, I mean, I actually wrote P here, so make sure that you change that to cost of tube. Okay, so the cost of a tube is going to be multiplied by the number of tubes, and then that is at most, we can't spend more than $20. So we're going to take the cost of the tubes, $4.30, times, so multiplied, the number of tubes, and there they told us to let P represent the number of tubes, is at most. That means it has to be less than or equal to 20. So I've got P times 4.3 is less than or equal to 20. I'm going to rewrite that a little bit closer together. Okay, so now I'm going to divide both sides by 4.3. And P is less than or equal to 4.6. Okay, well, let's think about that. Can you go out and buy 4.6 tubes of paint? Not really. You can only buy whole tubes. So she can only go out and buy 4 tubes. We can't say 5 because that will cost over $20. And we said P, the number of tubes, has to be less than or equal to 4.6. So the most she can buy is 4 tubes of paint. Okay, so again, all we're doing is we're solving these inequalities by doing the inverse rule, either multiplying or dividing. And if you divide or multiply by a negative number, make sure you flip the sign. And that is it.